Hello, everybody. Welcome for joining us today at this work session on the Virginia Railway Express. I first want to explain why the board is down to 3. My one colleague was here this morning and then had to go out of town, so John Weistat just could not be with us. It was a last-minute travel work for his other job. And actually on that side, Libby Garvey has had some surgery lately and has been joining us when it is possible, and other times it is just not. So today was one of the days she could not be here with us as well. But we're very happy to welcome the Virginia Railway Express along with its leader, Doug Allen. Thank you for joining us. If you want to bring your team up to the table. Today's work session will focus on 2 things. One, some information on the work of VRE and its system's future. So we're going to hear, and this is being televised, so your audience is far greater than the people in the room. And then the second part of the discussion is really going to be about the project you have moving forward and discussions about the station in Crystal City and where you stand with that. And I know at some point the county board will be providing some official reaction to that. Today it's mostly listening, asking some questions. The process we have is that it'll go through our Transportation Commission first, and then come September we will have a public hearing and be taking some action in terms of a preferred alternative that we would put forward as well. So with that, and I also want to acknowledge that one of the 3 of us is the county board representative on the Virginia Railway Express, and that's Katie Crystal. Did you have anything you wanted to say at the start of the work session? I hadn't given you any lead time with that.
That's just fine. It might not be the most eloquent oratory, but just thanks. It's nice to have this opportunity to talk in our context rather than out in Woodbridge, and to have this opportunity to dig in not only to the question of the Crystal City Station, which is the most active in the Commonwealth, but as well talk a little bit about VRE's future and how VRE fits into not only our transportation landscape in Crystal City, but to the planning landscape and the economic future of Crystal City. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, very good. Mr. Manager, are we able to skip you? Go right to the presentations? Perfect. All right. Mr. Allen, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for allowing us to come and share our information and talk about VRE. Arlington is a key part of the success of VRE. As Jay, you pointed out, or as Katie actually pointed out, it's the most heavily used station in the Commonwealth. And it's either our 2nd or 3rd. It's tied with Union Station in terms of the most active station in terms of our riders. So we're excited with the project and the progress that's been made on the project. We're also excited to give a more full briefing of what VRE is, what our plans are for the future, how the proposed project fits into that. So we've organized this in a way where Tom Hickey will go through a high view of the plan, how the Crystal City Station fits into it, and then Sonali Suniji, our project manager on the Crystal City Station project, will get into more detail. And we're all available to answer any questions and go from there.
Very good.
And this is Tom Hickey. He's the head of our development group.
Okay, welcome, Tom.
Thank you. As Doug said, today we're going to start by going through an overview of VRE, what our plans for the future are, and how Crystal City and Arlington County fit into that future.
If you don't mind, could you bring that microphone even closer to your...
Certainly.
There you go. Great.
Then I'll focus in on some projects in particular, what we're calling the Potomac Crossing Corridor, which is a number of projects that all revolve around Arlington County and the district end of our lines. And then we'll follow up, particularly my project manager here, Sonali Suniji, will go over the Crystal City Station and where we are with Crystal City. First of all, just as a matter of background, I'm sure you're all familiar, but Who we are a commuter rail system, which means we use railroad tracks that exist as opposed to creating new rights-of-way or new rights-of-way or new methods of using roadways. Our services are focused on both Washington, D.C., as well as Northern Virginia, bringing longer distance commuters to the Arlington as well as the district and Alexandria. We consist of 2 lines, 96 miles in total length of a system, and we bring peak capacity, which we'll get into in a moment, to several highway corridors that would otherwise be even more crowded than they already are. And finally, we carry about 20,000 daily commuters and we've done studies that have demonstrated those are commuters who would otherwise be driving. So we can almost say a 1-to-1 correlation on the riders and cars on the road that we are taking off. This gives you a quick overview of a graphic overview of how our system works. Yellow circles are where people are boarding. The bigger the circle, the more people. And the blue circles are where people are getting off, which is all up in, for the most part, in Northern Virginia or the district. As Doug said, LaFont is our single busiest station by far. Union Station and Crystal City for each annual census duke it out for who's number 2 and who's number 3. They're almost the same in terms of ridership. And Alexandria is the next 4th, and then we have a couple other stations where get off. Another way of looking at it is these are all of the origins for where, down to the intersection of where people originate who use VRE coming into Alexandria as well as the city, as well as into the district, which demonstrates the reach of rail to broaden the economic benefits, the job market and labor pool for Arlington and Crystal City. But that's only part of the story. This map shows you where, again, likewise by our annual censuses, where we draw passengers from a regular basis. So we have regular commuters who are coming as far away as from Richmond. And then we have stray commuters, which are shown here in light blue, or from various other counties who on a daily basis use the system. So it's a very broad labor pool that we bring people to jobs at the north end of our lines. As far as destination, this shows you where people get off at Crystal City, the white dot, travel. Good number of them, 69% walk to their ultimate destination, to a Crystal City job. Another 31% use some other mode, metro rail, bus, or other means to get to other portions of Arlington County, both immediately adjacent to Crystal City and in Pentagon City, a couple other clusters, but up on the Orange Line corridor by Clarington also. So what we are known for, VRE is known for our safe operations in the industry, our high customer satisfaction, the quality, and we get that customer satisfaction by the quality of service and the reliability of our services. And all of that comes about because we have a strong partnership with our host railroads. We operate on 3 different railroads, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Amtrak for a short distance. We do not own any railroad ourselves, so to a degree, our operating practices and how we can operate and how often we can operate is all privy to agreements and the forbearance of the host railroads we operate on. As far as our importance to Arlington County, we're a part of a balanced transportation system that involves many modes, including highways. We are a very effective, cost-effective means of adding peak capacity. There was a recent state study that indicated that their investment in passenger rail yields a 350% return in general revenue funds. So that's 3.5 times dollars for every dollar that the state spends. We are very effective in reducing peak traffic to and through Arlington County. I'm going to emphasize the peak nature. I-95 and 395 and US 1 are never going to be free flowing no matter how many people we get on the train. But during the peak of the peak, we take that load, we take the load off the highways. And we're a very effective way of maximizing Arlington County economic competitiveness as far as the job market and the labor pool. Oops, wrong button. This makes the point about peak of the peak. Looking at the 14th Street bridges, which at one end are anchored in Arlington County, 11% of the traffic during the peak hour, 6:30 to 7:30, when there is the most traffic on all those roads. 11% of the people traveling across the Potomac are doing so on VRE. So that would be 11% more traffic lane on 95 and 66, in addition to what's there already, if we weren't there to take the peak off of that peak. So we feel we can do more and are working to do more. Our System Plan 2040, which was passed in 2014, set as a goal to effectively double the ridership, or actually more than double the ridership that we would achieve if we just kind of let things go in a steady state. We've had a consistent growth since '92, but we feel we can improve that growth by running more trains. The System Plan 2040 basically comes down to two phases. Phase one, which is what we are engaged in right now and will be through 2020, is to run longer trains. That doesn't take infrastructure immediately, but it does mean that we need more rail cars. More rail cars mean we need longer storage tracks at both ends of the line for longer trains. We need more station parking so people can get into those seats. And we need longer and second platforms. And we're doing that right now. We have 11 stations right now that are in some manner of design or construction for longer platforms. Phase two and phase three is what's coming. That's earning additional slots through capacity improvements. The Long Bridge corridor improvements that I'll talk about in a moment are key to that, but we're also working with the state to add additional tracks to the CSX corridor, and also even more parking and even more rail cars. It's a continuous cycle as far as being able to run longer trains and more trains.
Slots are what we refer to as the ability to run a train in a time window, and that's what that means.
Yeah. Right now, contractually we can run 38 slots, for example. The system plan is proposing 66 to 92 slots. Our vision specific to Crystal City is to enhance the commuter rail service with those additional slots and more trains. So we're looking at more and longer VRE trains. It's not just to carry more people into the district. It's to operate a bidirectional reverse peak service, a mini metro as it were, so that commuter rail can serve for Arlington County as an alternative to WMATA between the district and Arlington County. And WMATA strongly endorses that philosophy as well. Ours is the most direct route if you're going to Capitol Hill, Union Station areas over by Noma, as opposed to going by the present WMATA means a change of trains, and going through an area that WMATA is hard pressed to provide enough capacity for everybody else who rides. So if we can take some of that off and provide people a faster, straighter trip, we're going to enhance some service. But to do that, we need to run trains in both directions. For that, we need more capacity in the railroad. We're also engaged in conversations with MARC, MTA, about bringing some of their trains down to Alexandria. So again, people from Maryland have equal opportunity to get to Crystal City as people from Northern Virginia have via VRE to get to the Alexandria area. The Arlington County area. We're also looking at opportunities wherever we can to improve intermodal connectivity, particularly at Crystal City. We're looking for ways to improve the link between VRE and Metro. The new entrance the county is working on is at 18th Street is a good way of improving that. We're also looking for a better on-street experience. We're also exploring the potential of a tunnel so that we have a grade-separated connection for passengers to connect to Metro. Don't know where that's going. That's going to be looked at in further stages. We're also looking at, in partnerships with others in the lead, how we can affect, or most importantly, not preclude, a better pedestrian linkage between Crystal City and National Airport. So when I mentioned the Potomac Crossing Corridor, there's a lot of focus, and I'm sure you've all heard the pitches about the importance of Long Bridge and going from 2 to 4 tracks on the bridge. But from our perspective, it's not just that bridge, the 1.5-mile bridge, but it's really the whole 8-mile corridor from where, in the district near LaFont Station, where Amtrak goes off from the CSX line, the CSX line through Crystal City and Alexandria to AF, which is just south of there. So we really need to improve that entire corridor in terms of stations, Crystal City being one of them, in terms of making sure it's a continuous 4-track alignment, which includes Long Bridge, so that we have the capacity to bring more trains. As this traffic split shows, right now we are the greatest. We are the greatest number of. We operate the greatest number of trains across the bridge, and that proportional number we will be even more. We will be even a greater user of this corridor in the future. So the Long Bridge expansion project, in basic terms, is to take a two-track bridge and make that a four-track bridge between a place called LE, which is L'Enfant, and RO, which is Roslyn Interlockings. It's really 6 separate bridges. The bridge across the Potomac is, of course, the most prominent one, but there are 5 other minor bridges in that corridor, all of which need to be addressed. Every single one of them involving park property, which makes them an interesting, complicated project, spread over almost 1.5 miles. The benefits to come are for both commuter rail as well as intercity rail with Amtrak operates and the freight trains that CSX operates. And it's also necessary, if we are going to add more commuter trains as VRE trains or add MARC trains, we need to have that additional capacity. Right now, the study is in PE and NEPA through a Tiger grant, it's funded through, at least through the next stage of engineering through the Atlantic Gateway Fast Lane grant. So at that, we're down to Crystal City. And Sonali, do you want to talk about that?
Let me expand a little bit on the Atlantic Gateway project that Tom just mentioned. The state of Virginia, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation received a grant from the federal government. It's called Atlantic Gateway, and it will build that 4th track that Tom was mentioning between Alexandria and essentially the Potomac River. And so it's an active project. It's in design. The Crystal City Station is in that area, and I'm sure Sonali is going to expand on that, but the Atlantic Gateway is a funded project. It's an active project, and it's one of the reasons that we are going to be addressing and identifying what we need to do at Crystal City so that we fit in nicely with that project.
So with the Crystal City project, we've been underway for a few months, and where we are today is trying to select a station location. We have 3 locations that are under consideration. One of them is, option 1 is where the Crystal City station exists today, and then there are 2 more further south on the railroad. We started with looking at a space for the station where we could fit in a station that was twice as long as the current station, and being able to serve the platform with 2 tracks. So basically, right now we have a side platform, and we want to move it and turn it into an island platform in the future so that we can have 2 trains serving the platform at the same time. So the existing location, we can fit that in there with some track relocations, but it's not the most ideal location for various reasons. And so we're also looking at 2 other locations further south on the railroad. And as Doug and Tom mentioned, we're trying to keep up the pace with the 4th track. We want to coordinate construction with the 4th track. They are already funded for construction, and well, we are not. So we want to try to catch up. The other couple of other key important sort of factors that we're looking at are to make sure that we have good connectivity with the transportation networks. As Tom mentioned, about 70% of our riders walk to their destination, so we want to make sure we connect to the local transportation networks, and then another 30% connect to Metro Rail and Metro Way and local buses, and so we want to make sure we connect to those as well. So I'm going to go over the 3 options, and I'd just like to mention that for all of the options, there are some threshold criteria. We have to have a station that is 850 feet long, a platform that's 850 feet long, and we'll have 2 grade separated access points because we need to cross the tracks either under or over to get to Crystal Drive. And right now, for all options, we are open to either going under or over, but we're showing one of those options, the one that seems most feasible or most makes the most sense. But we're open to the other options as well at this point. This is option 1 in the location of the current Crystal City station, and you can see the platform shown in white. That's the existing platform. Proposed platform is shown in orange. On the north side, there's a tunnel that's proposed that would go under the tracks and loop around and connect to 12th Street. All the tunnels are shown in blue, and all the overpasses are shown in red. On the south side as well, you can see a tunnel shown with a ramp on one end and the stairs on the other end, connecting down to a mezzanine that goes under the tracks and comes up roughly where the existing passengers are used to disembarking and connecting to Crystal Drive. For option 2, this is located further south from option 1, but the north end is a ramp that is shown as a tunnel and then comes up on the south end of Crystal City Water Park, which is fairly close to where people get off now, and it's also close to where the proposed new metro rail station is located. On the south side, we're showing in red an overpass, stairs and an elevator that bring you up to the level of, basically to the level of the terrace between the 2 office towers for Crystal Park. At that point, we haven't worked out how people would get to Crystal Drive. One option is to go through 2011 Crystal Drive, the office building on the right-hand side that connects directly into Crystal Drive. And there's an elevator, a lobby there that can be repurposed for us. And the other option is to basically go over the terrace and come out into the plaza area next to Crystal Drive. And option 3 is the southernmost option. This platform is completely behind the office buildings, and on either end, we're showing a bridge that connects to the terrace level between the 2 office towers. On the north side of this option, that we pretty much come out to the same place as the south end of option 2. On the south end of this option, we still need to work out how people can get to Crystal Drive. For all of these options, we know that the connection to Reagan National Airport, a pedestrian link that can connect Crystal City and the station to the airport is important, and all three options support that idea. However, this is not part of our project, but we just wanted to make sure that we are aware of this. So we've done a technical evaluation of all of these options. We had 4 factors that we evaluated against, and as you can see, option 2 seems to work the best for local and regional transportation connections, and also doesn't do too badly on the other 2 factors, which are community and environmental impacts, and looking at major cost elements. At this point in our study, we have, it's a very preliminary stage, and so we've looked at information on appropriate to that phase of the study. And so at this point, we believe that option 2 would be a good option for us. As far as the project timeline, we've had a public meeting on June 7th, and all of this information that I just presented was presented at that public meeting. Prior to that, we did have a public meeting in March, at the end of March, when we went out with before we had really done any work to get feedback on what the factors should be, and what our design parameters were, and try to get some feedback on what we should be looking at. We got a considerable feedback on certain issues that led us to change our plan a little bit and include some additional evaluation and monitoring, especially noise being a significant issue that we tried to look at in more detail than we would have at this stage, and with the understanding that that was an issue of concern for for many people here. And then we went ahead and did the evaluation and have presented the evaluation in June. And right now we're in a process of collecting feedback. We've already received a lot of comments, and we're trying to prepare responses to that. We briefed the VRE Operations Board in June as well on the status of the project. And the next stage is to pick a station location so that we can put in more effort into developing a concept design to work out many more details. And this is just the first phase of the project. This is the phase that's funded by Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, NVTA. And once we're done with this phase, we will move into the next phase, which is preliminary engineering and environmental documentation, which is also funded by the state. So that's the next stage, that phase that is funded, and we'll try to move into that in the fall. Then we do not yet have funding for final design and construction. So the hope is to try to find that as soon as possible. And I'd like to end by saying, just giving a quick look ahead of what's coming. So today we are here, at the work session on July 21st. We'll have a VRE Operations Board meeting. At that point, we would like, the staff would like to recommend a preferred alternative to the board. They will not be taking any action. We don't expect them to take any action. But we do hope that our board would take an action on September 16th at their September meeting. And we would love to hear back from Arlington County on any feedback in the meantime.
Is that the end of your presentation? All right. Well, what I'd like to do is, among the three of us here, and the staff may have some questions as well, but essentially start with just a first item on the agenda, which is the sort of the larger VRE work plan and some of those questions, and then once we finish that, talk more specifically about the Crystal City Station. And I'll ask the first question, and that's a little bit more, if you could go into a little bit more detail about the Atlantic Gateway project and this, is it fourth or third and fourth tracks?
It's fourth track.
It's fourth track. So would you just give us a little bit more sense? I took from I remember when I was on NVTC, this discussion, but what is the timeline? And you suggested that all the funding for this project in its entirety, that it's sort of a compilation of smaller projects within a larger packaging, as I remember it. So can you give us a little sense about whether that funding is all there and what the timeline is to do that work?
Sure, and I'll let Tom get into the details. The Atlantic Gateway is actually, there's a section of it that's south of Alexandria. And south of Alexandria, it's 3 tracks. North of Alexandria, in this territory, it's 4 tracks. But I'll let Tom get into the details of what's in the Atlantic Gateway project. And then there's other projects that have been funded in that same territory. Existing Lorton platform, but also begin work to build the second platform. As Sonali pointed out, we want to have all of our stations served by at least 2 tracks, if not 3 tracks.
That Lorton station part of the Atlantic Gateway?
It's in that same territory.
Is,
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a very good example of, like Crystal City, we have projects that we're doing station works in close association with track work, and the timing of who gets in there first and make sure that we build what we need before there's an active railroad track in the place becomes timely and critical for the phasing of many of these projects. In the case of, just to dispose of it, the Atlantic Gateway includes several highway improvements. It includes some transportation, smart transportation options and such. But as far as the railroad elements are concerned, they are threefold. They are down south between Franconia and Occoquan, putting a third track where there are only 2 now, and that, as Doug said, involves our projects at Lorton Station as far as putting another platform there and improvements to Franconia Springfield. So we've got 2 stations working closely there. I'm just going to put that aside because otherwise that has nothing to do with what we're here to talk about. But there are 2 other parts. One is the 4th track from RO, which is effectively the Potomac River, down to AF, which is just south of Alexandria, where 3 tracks pick up. So that would provide 4 tracks in that corridor. That is funded through construction. The earlier work through NEPA and PE took place already under the terms of a project called, you may have heard, DC to RVA, the Southeast High Speed Rail Project. They've been working on that. The DRPT has been working on that for close to 3 years now. And right now, the draft EIS is in front of the FRA for review, and they're looking to get a ROD late this year or early next year, as far as being able to move to next steps. When that is ready, the Atlantic Gateway has the funding then to continue with the engineering, and then the actual construction of that 4th track. It's about 6 miles. The third rail element is the Long Bridge itself. Right now, the Long Bridge through a Tiger Grant is funded through preliminary engineering and NEPA. That's being led by DDOT in partnership with DRPT and VRE.
DDOT, District Department of Transportation. District
Yes.
of Columbia.
We have a formal partnership that's maintained through an agreement for the 3 parties. So they were the biggest contributor to this phase. So although we all have contributed funds to it, so we have, so they are in the lead. The next phase would be final design, and that is what DRPT has funding through the Atlantic Gateway to fund. We still do not have the funding yet for construction
Of the
Long Bridge, which is 6 bridges, that 1.4 miles of 4th track and bridges.
Remind me, is that another bridge going in?
That's what's being
Determined yet? It's
that's
being
not-
studied?
Yes.
Okay, so how you increase the capacity is not yet designed or determined?
That's part of the environmental study, is to identify a series of options, determine what the environmental impacts are, and through preliminary engineering, identify, do you add another bridge next to the existing bridges, or do you remove the existing bridges and put new bridges in?
And once you get over and capacity is added to the bridge, then from the bridge to further destinations like Union Station, no additional capacity is needed in there?
Additional capacity is needed. That's another project we haven't discussed, which is starting this fiscal year. We have funding from the state to do the PE it's a very similar project to Crystal City for LaFont Station and putting a 4th track through LaFont as well. That brings us up to the junction with Amtrak, and we have 2 Amtrak tracks and we have 2 CSX tracks parting their ways there. So we would have 4 tracks up to that point where there's 2 tracks to 2 tracks. And that provides fluidity for the entire corridor at that point, once we have all the way down.
So that's the only remaining piece is from the bridge to L'Enfant?
That's right. And we said
Spot to where they split off to go to Union Station. Yep.
we have funding to start to start and complete NEPA and preliminary engineering for that 0.7 of a mile stretch.
I know timelines can change, but when do you think, what's the timeline you're working under to have all of that done? Is there a projection?
Excepting the Long Bridge, which kind of lives a life of its own, we expect to have all of those projects under design into the engineering phase by 2019, and all of those constructed by 21-22. The Long Bridge, because of the NEPA process, is much more involved than what we have to do for all those other projects, needs another year, so it would be lagging a year behind that timeline as presently scheduled.
Okay. Well, I got a couple more, but Christian, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'll just throw one out. Tom, you talked a little bit about the sort of the vision that VRE could serve as a metro alternative. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what you envision there?
Sure. If we can, right now we operate predominantly peak traffic going into the city in the morning and predominantly peak traffic coming out. So it works well for some passengers, but for example, if you're a resident of Crystal City, you can't go, you can go into the district now during rush hours, but there are no off-peak trains and such. Nor is it possible for district residents to come down to Crystal City or anywhere in Virginia for jobs. So in addition to keeping our peak traffic growing and with sufficient capacity for our peak customers going in the peak direction. With additional capacity, we can run, and these improvements, including Crystal City, we can run trains in the counterflow direction and provide a direct service that's reliable. It would never be the type of headways you'd see on Metro, but it would. What we envision is a half-hourly, well, the system plan envisions a half-hourly reverse peak service, and throughout the day, a train every hour on both branches. So that's 2 trains every hour, actually, in both directions.
I could certainly see intuitively how that could be very attractive, particularly if there are circumstances like we had the past year with Safe Track, but normally and operationally, given the headway disparity and given the price going from Zone 2 to Zone 1, like, are you sensing that there's a real demand for that? Because while I get it's a one-seat, it's a straighter shot ride, it's substantially more expensive, and it would seem to be not so much a competitive advantage for riders.
One of the things we need to look at as we're applying that service is how we market that in terms of price. If you think about it, we have to provide enough seats for everybody who wants to get in the morning to Alexandria, and then people start getting off the trains. So we have empty seats that we could sell a second time. As people get off at Alexandria and Crystal City, we have capacity. So whether we price those in the same manner of a typical cost, where we actually have to add a seat or add cars in order to provide accommodation, that's capacity we can sell twice. So it makes sense. No sense in doing that.
A little more cost competitive than one might think.
That's right.
So we might be seeing some new fare products that.
And during Safe Track, anecdotally, but we've seen the number that presentation that said 20,000 riders a day would have said 19 a year ago. We have a lot of passengers who just have not thought to use us, who have tried us during Safe Track and have stayed with us because they said, yeah, it's taking me straight to where I want to go, even with the. Remember, a lot of our riders are also traveling on commuter benefits, so they don't actually see the out-of-pocket hit of that. But we should still make it price it more competitively if we want to go after that market, particularly if we've sold that seat once.
I'm going to ask a follow-up on that one. I've heard this discussed many times, and the idea of MARC trains continuing beyond Union Station into Virginia and VRE trains continuing beyond Union Station into Maryland. Mm-hmm. Is that a live conversation anywhere?
Well, from a
obstacles to that?
There's a lot. There's obstacles that would have to be overcome. It's a policy decision ultimately, and we haven't had that conversation with Operations Board or the Commission. But as technical folks, we are looking at, with the capacity that's being talked about with the Long Bridge, there would be the capacity for MARC trains beyond that bridge and to go probably as far as Alexandria. Now, it depends on where the FBI headquarters ends up. If it ends up out at Franconia Springfield, then perhaps trains would go from MARC all the way down there, perhaps. It just shows what the potential could be in the future for that kind of those kind of regional connections. I do think that there would be some benefit in looking at that eventually. For instance, as trains come down from Maryland, a lot of people get off at Union Station, get on Metro to go to LaFont. Well, it might make more sense for them just to stay on a MARC train to get off at LaFont directly. So those kinds of opportunities present themselves. The number of passengers we're talking about is a lot smaller than what Metro carries. It helps with those regional connections. And these projects that we're talking about open up those opportunities to have those discussions and possibly implement those kind of operations.
I mean, I would just say that intuitively it makes a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. Obviously, intuitively you have one system. That's a regional commuter system, but we don't have that. We have two. But you can go to other cities in the world, Paris being a great example, where you have a very active metro system, and underlying that you have a regional commuter system. There are many of the same stations. Yeah. But, it's like taking the express. I mean, it may not come as often, but for people doing a longer commute, we try to avoid those boundaries whenever we can and recognize that the needs of people in the region are irrespective of what jurisdictional border is there. They may need to go from, Spotsylvania to Union Station or beyond Union Station, or as you say, if there's an FBI building down here. and to allow them to do that on one trip is a good thing. So I, for one, would think it's certainly something that should be explored as the system matures into the future.
Follow on to that from the perspective of we have had informal conversations with our counterparts at MARC and their parent MTA. They look at our ridership, that bubble map I had on the third slide. It showed that, Union Station is our third busiest station, and the ridership that we carry to LaFont is double that ridership. Crystal City is equal to Union Station. Mark looks at that and says, we only go to Union Station, and we're sure our passengers from Maryland want to go to the same places that we operate without having to go through a double transfer through the metro system. So that's attractive to them from that standpoint. They see that as a potential. Secondly, second point is still getting a little bit into the operational weeds. One of our in fact, our single highest priority project is to get more storage space for our trains to lay over at Union Station. MARC has the same problem, but they don't have a terminal yard situation like we have, and we're trying to expand. A lot of their trains sit at Union Station on the platform, so there's 2 or 3 trains on a track. If you're a midday passenger, you have to walk by 2 trains sitting there to get to a third train. Amtrak charges a fortune for those trains. Anecdotally, this is word we got from MARC, although we haven't seen the numbers to prove it, but the MARC people have told us one of the reasons they started running midday service between Baltimore and Washington a few years back is because Amtrak was charging them so much to park the train. It cost less to run the train all day than to leave it. They still store trains. Those trains have the potential. There's former freight yards in the vicinity of Alexandria where we could build collectively a nice yard and give them a place as a base of operation. So they see that as a potential also.
I mean, on the face of it, MARC may have more to benefit because of the activity centers and the job centers just in Northern Virginia, but I have to think it's a benefit all the way around. So I know it's not directly a part of the conversation today, but hearing where your long-range planning is and what you'd like to accomplish, you talked about almost a tripling of capacity over the Long Bridge is in your plan, right?
Right.
That's a substantial enhanced capacity.
Adding that capacity and adding a station like Crystal City that's well located, that has that access, but also has the ability to be served by 2 tracks, opens up a lot of regional potential. And we just need to be aware of that. We need to pursue it just because of the VRE trains, but in the future there could be some other opportunities that is a benefit to the region.
Yeah, I think.
And to Arlington County with a robust station at Crystal City.
I mean, being the largest station in terms of users now, I mean, the potential is substantial in terms of the integration with other rail. I'm going to make one other comment before we go to Crystal City, and that is just, and this is not really a question, but a plug, which is, as that Long Bridge discussion goes on, I know we're going to get to a pedestrian bridge discussion to the airport. There's another pedestrian bridge that we are hoping gets figured out in the discussion of Long Bridge, which is the pedestrian bridge, bicycle pedestrian access from the Mount Vernon Trail over to Long Bridge Park.
Yeah.
That is a key part of the long-range master plan for Long Bridge Park to help connect it not just on the south, but to the north, and I think would really open it up in many ways to a lot of people.
And we've had that discussion in the technical committee that Tom was referring to and the policy committee that we've discussed with the Long Bridge study. The purpose and need of the EIS is to study railroad capacity, but we recognize that there's going to be an interest in hike and bike access across Potomac, and so that's being contemplated in the overall study. Although it's not purpose and need of the project, we recognize there's a real need for it, and that's being contemplated.
And that's great, because, you know, we all work towards complete streets, complete systems, and you should never be doing a road project or another project, especially with railroads that tend to be an obstacle to some of these other things, having to get over them or under them or around them. So it really is the moment in which to build into the plan that other connection, which is important for walkers and cyclists. Okay, shall we go to the next? I'm going to turn to Katie to ask the first questions about the Crystal City station.
Fantastic, thank you. And appreciate the good questions about the long-term system plan. Having a little more access to that information is nevertheless really helpful and interesting to hear the answers to those questions. I want to actually, I have a number of questions that I want to ask, particularly about horn noise and noise in general. I know we have a lot of residents with us who've raised those concerns to us. But I wanted to actually begin maybe with a little bit of the Arlington context around the Crystal City station. So I'll turn a little more to our staff to talk. We've had a lot of conversations about how, the multimodality of this station and connectivity to Metro. But I think has been alluded to in a couple of ways. The station is also part of our sector plan for Crystal City. And I think we have our chief planner for Crystal City here and wondered if we could just hear a little bit of perspective about how this station, and particularly to the extent we've evaluated these station options, fit into or map into our plans for development of that sector. One example, as Anthony's coming to the table, is we saw, for example, in the assessment of the options, there's a differential of about 1,500 jobs between the different options that are accessible within a half a mile. What do we know about the development and the concentration of office density and where more jobs might be coming within Crystal City? So any thoughts you have about that or other elements of the Crystal City sector plan that could have some bearing on this decision for the board?
Certainly. There it is.
Thank you. Anthony Fusarelli from the Planning Division, for the record. So I guess the way to maybe frame some of the conversations that we've had as part of the technical working group and as part of the broader community conversation related to the sector plan is to back up to 2010. When the county board adopted the sector plan, the assumption at that time was actually the VRE station remained in its current location. There were some talks with our regional transportation partners at that time about would there be the possibility of moving it further south, further north. At that point, there was really no substantive conversation about that issue. However, the sector plan did point out a number of, I think, relevant transportation-related points and recommendations as it relates to VRE in particular. One is in order to be able to support the future growth envisioned in the sector plan, which at full build-out, we're talking about a net increase of about 15 million square feet of mixed-use development or more. In order to support that with an adequate and sort of functioning transportation system, we need to increase the share of commuters, travelers who are not traveling in single-occupant vehicles. One of the ways to do that is to expand the array of transit options we have there available, and VRE is certainly an important component of that. Secondly, even assuming that the VRE station remained in its current location, the sector plan discussions acknowledged that its location is perhaps not ideal from a perspective of people easily see and know that it's there. Anyone who's visited the station before, once you're there, you understand where it is, but it's not all that visible from Crystal Drive. And that's really an issue that I think needs to be sort of grappled with in all three of the options that VRE is currently looking at. But the sector plan does have guidance to improve and enhance those connections. At that time, it was presumed enhancing the connection to where the station location is currently. And then thirdly, there was an important, I think, topic which still remains of discussion is this possibility for high-speed rail. And so the sector plan, without getting into specifics, does recommend that any sort of transit or transportation-related improvements in this area preserve the ability to incorporate high-speed rail into the future, recognizing the immediate proximity of National Airport and the other transit services that traverse the corridor. So from the sector plan and looking at the current options we have on the table, I think three main topics to focus on include station access. So how effective would station access be between Crystal Drive and other destinations or origins to each of the three locations? What are the intermodal connections and how do those vary across the three options? as well as I think the point you raised earlier about the sector plan build-out and what do we know about that. So what we know is that the sector plan envisioned or imagined a potential build-out 30, 40, 50 years into the future. And we know the assumptions made in terms of where certain buildings of certain uses could be provided. All that said, the plan does have a lot of flexibility for whether a particular site is developed residential versus commercial versus hotel. But when looking at the three different options, there are some differences in terms of proximity to the amount of potential development that was envisioned under the plan. And so those are all issues that I think we've been sort of working with and coordinating with our partners at VRE and others to better understand these issues.
So that is tremendously helpful. Can I push a little further and ask, so looking at those, at the plan in general and those sort of specific criteria that you highlighted, the intermodal connections, the sector plan build out and the visibility of the station, does that lead you then, as one of the lead authors of this plan, to lean towards one option over another?
I think
You got it.
looking at each of those criteria individually. So with station access, we would possibly view options 1 and options 2 as being distinct from option 3 in the following key ways. With option 1 and option 2, the Crystal Drive, the experience along Crystal Drive as a pedestrian and a commuter, the ability to walk via a trail, a path, some other facility, outdoor facility that could be part of the public realm to access the station platform is different conceptually from the option 3 alternative, which you would need to either, as presented, you would need to either traverse through an office building or two, privately owned along Crystal Drive, to access sort of a rooftop terrace and then bridge over. Now, there are design solutions that creative designers and architects and landscape architects can come up with, but that is, I think, for us, a different condition than having sort of an extension of the sidewalk that comes off of Crystal Drive and goes directly to the platform location. From intermodal connectivity, again, considering both Metro, the existing Metro station entrance at 18th and Clark, as well as the planned second entrance at 18th and Crystal, options 1 and 2 both appear to perform better and provide more direct connectivity to Metro Rail. I think with option 3, if you were to be able to overcome the connectivity challenges between the platform and Crystal Drive, all 3 options, I think, would perform well in terms of access to Metroway, which is another important element of the transit system. Finally, I think in terms of sector plan build-out, the analysis shows that option 2, and this is really a function of the assumptions made in the sector plan build-out scenario, option 2 actually is, in terms of a half-mile catchment range, it provides access to about 2 to 3 million more square feet of envisioned potential build-out compared with options 1 and options 3.
Really helpful, thank you. Thanks. So I have maybe a couple of other questions, or a few other questions, but I'm also happy to.
Let's go to Christian and then come back to you.
Sounds good.
Christian?
Sure, thank you. So for each of these scenarios, could you tell me offhand, since they're not labeled, what's the proximity of where you would actually place the station to the closest structure? Do you have that information?
Closest structure, you mean whatever happens to be a building near?
Yes.
Okay. We don't have it qualified. Yeah, if we could go back to the presentation and bring up options 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. We don't have those quantified, although we could easily measure them and provide you with that number. But we can talk about it here. Let me go.
Oh, there you go, that's good.
Yeah, so trying to get, there we go, one more, there we go, okay, so for option one, as you can see, it's in direct proximity to the crescent-shaped residential building there. The little white box gives you a sense of where our existing platform is, so we actually move a little further away since we're taking the track, we're taking a side platform that's outside of the rail bed and moving it further towards the river between tracks, but effectively we're close, we're paralleling that residential building. Before I go on to the next one, does that answer the question for that one?
It's ballpark number would be helpful, just for my orientation.
To give you a sense,
Point on the left.
to give you a sense, the existing platform is around 400 feet long.
But as far as offset, if you look at where the D in demolishing existing is, that's the closest point of approach. That's the width of a driveway with some dumpsters, so I'm going to say that's probably about 25 feet offset.
Okay.
We would be moving it another 15 feet further by moving one track over.
Okay.
Option two, the platform has a similar relationship to the other Crescent building. It looks similar, but that's a different set of residential buildings. It's for the south end of the platform, but as you get to the, I'm sorry, for the north end of the platform, but as you get to the south end, we're closer to office buildings. It does make a distinction in that our locomotives, I mean, there are always exceptions on any given day for operations, but our locomotives are always placed on the south end of a train. So it's that end of the train which is where the noisemaker is effectively. Now, there's horns that are blown before you get to the platform and out, and they have a large scatter area, but as far as the direct noise of a locomotive and a train, the coaches roll, the locomotive makes noise.
Can I
I'm sure
just
we'll
clarify?
do the horn separately, right?
Yeah, we'll get to the horn, the noise part, but let me just clarify. You just mentioned commercial. The commercial building is the one at the far left side of the platform. There still is a residential building. It's
Yes,
companion buildings maybe to the others, but this is the end of that one curved
Correct.
building is probably around the same distance as the last slide we saw.
in fact, I think the offset works pretty much the same. It's there's a driveway, and then we're moving another track center over. So it's 20 plus 15, 35-ish.
Right.
Okay.
And the other building,
22.
and the other of the two buildings is a little further away than the left side of the building.
Yeah,
Platform ends, what, at the end of the orange in your
yes,
proposal?
yes.
So,
So the locomotive would be closer to where the word bridge is to the left.
right.
That's actually not the car. The platform is designed for the passenger cars, and then the locomotive is beyond that.
Got it.
Whereas, I'm just going to go back to one. On one, it would be, again, likewise, pretty much right where the water park, the locomotive would be where the water park is.
Got it.
Oops, and that's going the wrong way. Let me do the third one, which is just for completeness. It's effectively the same offset, maybe a little bit more. There's the right-of-way curves, and we're trying to straighten out tracks, so it looks like we would maybe be another 10 feet further. In this case, the locomotive would be down where the word bridge is off to the left. The north end entrance is identical to what is the south end entrance on option 2.
Okay.
And we can give you actual dimensions. We just
Thank
don't.
you, very helpful, very helpful. And just by way of my lack of familiarity, so does Crystal City provide the existing station that's in closest proximity to residential buildings, or are there other analogs that you have with other stations along either line?
I think anything's as close.
Yeah, we have residential, Lorton, for example, but there's a parking lot. So I'm hard pressed to think of, Doug, other than the homes in the single-family homes in Fredericksburg and Manassas, where we have construction so close to the tracks.
Okay. We can go on.
Okay, Katie?
Yeah, well, I actually want to get into this question of the horns, and I think Christian's questions about the locomotive placement is a great segue. I think one of the things that I'm sort of trying to wrap my head around, and perhaps it's possible as we continue these deliberations to show or denote on the map both sort of not just where the platform is, but where specifically the locomotive would be, and also where specifically the horn is sounded. Because we know that the purpose of the horns by CSX protocol is to warn passengers on the platform. So presumably the horn is not sounded at the moment the train hits the platform, but rather well before. Can you say any more to us about how, any protocols about how far away the horn is sounded and show where on the map?
If we can have the slides back.
Great.
Sonali had the foresight to download some pictures of that. Yeah, that's one. Okay, so Sonali, you may explain this.
So we did, do noise monitoring to try to understand the impacts of 24-hour noise as well as looking at the short-term noise. And this is for option 1, which is, and it shows the platform in orange, and then the 2 dots at the ends of the platform, that's where the horn would be sounded when the train's trying to leave the station after it has serviced the station. And then further away, about a quarter mile away, that's the longer strips. Those are the locations where, as the train is approaching the station, they are required to blow the horn to warn passengers on the station. So with this station option, you can see where the horn would be blown. While I'm on the slide, I'll also explain that on the right, there's a chart that is from the FTA guidance. And what that chart basically shows is that when there's a project, they do expect some kind of change in the noise. If the noise level that you start out with is at a lower level, the amount of change that you can sort of withstand is higher. There's a greater flexibility in a lower noise environment. But Crystal City is already a louder noise environment more on the right-hand side of the scale. So there isn't as much flexibility for the changes in the noise. However, for this, for all 3 options, actually, we stay well within the FTA guidance for the impact. That's not by design. That's just the way the noise, monitoring has worked out. So even though we acknowledge that there is a lot of noise and there is an existing noise level that we need to consider, and definitely the trains are part of that, contributing to that noise level. But as far as this project is concerned, and I can show you the next 2 slides as well, they stay within that no impact category.
So I think, for what it's worth, and based on, sort of some of the concerns of members of our community, I hear you that the marginal differential doesn't rise to the level of FTA standards, but it is, experienced by folks. And so I think having some sense actually of where that marginal differential will originate is helpful across the 3.
You want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So that's for option 2. Again, you can see how the noise locations, the horn sounding locations are, close to residential on the north side.
Yeah.
And then for option 3 as well. Excellent. So that was kind of the basis for, yes, they are different. Certainly we acknowledge that, but there isn't one that's that much better than the others. So,
Can you go back to 2 again, please? Just didn't get a long enough look at it.
Still place at 1801.
Dots on that nomograph are where we score.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So, all of this presumes, right, that the horns have to sound. And I know this has been a subject of ongoing conversation. And as some of our residents might know, and certainly as VRE and my colleagues know, we happen to share an attorney with VRE and the county. And I have asked him, Mr. McIsaac, if he might be willing to share a little bit about the conversations that VRE in Arlington has had over the years with CSX to see if there is some option other than horns having to sound. I think it would be clear, and VRE's staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not at all VRE's policy, nor even VRE's preference to have the disruptive horn sounds, but rather a protocol of the railroad on whose tracks we run. So, Mr. McIsaac.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure if this is on. It is. Mr. Chairman, there have been a number of conversations. This actually spawned some changes back in, it began in 2014. I know that there were conversations that VRE was having with CSX as a result of complaints coming out of Crystal City. And we had initial contact with the railroad. And you know, as they will tell you always, this is their railroad, and the reason why they have these protocols on signaling an approaching freight train is for safety reasons. So they're always going to be reluctant to relax them, you know, excessively anyway. They want to err on the side of caution at all times. We were not engaged with them directly to the very final conclusion they reached. I think they reached out more directly to the residents and had conversation, and then sort of internally reached a decision that they would relax the times when they sound the horns to begin only at 6 a.m. and end at 8 p.m. They would only use the horns from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, which is essentially our operating hours. That's when the platforms are very busy. But on the weekends and at night and over the night, they weren't going to do it. Now, the way these, as Doug and Tom particularly can talk more about, there is not like a regulatory requirement that they sound these horns at this time. The FRA, which regulates the activity, only requires this kind of stuff at grade crossings. What the FRA says is basically, you know, use prudent measures to ensure safety. And so it's really a judgment call by the railroad. And in their operating rules, they've laid these things out. And it was their decision to relax it, at least at Crystal City. So therefore, it's possible they could relax them further. And we did initiate some conversation with them just last week. The deputy CEO, who's the director of operations, Rich Dalton, and I sat down with one of the government relations folks and talked about this issue. And you know, we approached it delicately because, you know, with CSX, you could very well say, we would like to talk about this, and they could very well say, well, we don't want to. But in fact, they didn't say that. They said, okay, we understand what your concerns are. I'll have some internal conversation, and then we'll be back to you. So we're hoping we can have some more dialogue with them about maybe a further relaxation of the rules. And one of the point that we all realized was that it wasn't entirely clear to everyone, and maybe you guys have determined it recently, but it wasn't clear to us that the relaxation that occurred about a year ago, or maybe as much as 2, has actually been uniformly implemented. It's possible that some engineers are still sounding the horns more than the relaxation had suggested. And the final thing I'll say is that it's always a judgment call by the engineer. You know, whenever they think there's an issue out there, they're going to blow the horn, just to be sure. But so, you know, even if you have some established protocols, there may be instances where an engineer thinks it's prudent to sound the horn. Yeah. That's his call.
And there are opportunities, correct? I mean, we've seen them in other places in the CSX system where there are passenger warning systems other than horns, right? It's just a matter of negotiating an agreement to do that. Is that right or no?
Like, give me an example. What would an alternative warning be?
Well, actually, I don't know of any, and I'm been doing research, so on a regular basis about this subject. I'm not aware of any alternate warning system on the CSX system that's allowed. Amtrak has that at some of their stations. Every railroad has their own rules and their own, so they have a way of, at some of their stations.
Different rail system rather than somewhere else on CSX.
As an example, and CSX would need to feel that they can adopt it. I do want to point out and embellish what Mr. McIsaac has said here. This exception that's in the rule book is the only exception in the national CSX system. It's called out, I used to know the number. It's a specific operating rule that is specific to Crystal City. So just acknowledging, they've already had some flexibility on this subject, more so than they have shown anywhere else, anywhere on the VRE system. All of our other stations, some of which have apartments nearby, not as close as this, but have apartments, they still have to blow horns around the clock. So CSX has shown flexibility. We encourage them, as Steve has said, we've got conversations going on with him and with our deputy CEO to see whether a new conversation can be had. But the rule is very specific and states, after it makes the exception, the engineer is to use their discretion as far as when to blow the horn or not, because at any given time, anywhere on the railroad, if they feel there's somebody in the bushes or somebody in the way, they're going to blow that horn. They're always going to err on the side of safety, and the rule makes very clear that they are to continue to do so.
And they recently had an accident, right, with some of their
We had an
CSX
accident this
workers.
morning, two CSX, and well, actually, technically Amtrak had an accident, but just hit two track workers and killed them this morning.
Probably a good reminder of the importance of
Railroad,
safety.
the railroad is a dangerous place, and sometimes we lose track of that.
Thank you both.
Mr. Dorsey.
Can I just explore this a little bit more? So, Mr. McIsaac, you mentioned that this is CSX policy, not FRA policy. The grade crossing rules for FRA do allow for communities under certain conditions with certain apparatus installed to establish quiet zones. Does that not apply, since this is not a regulatory environment, but just simply internal company policy? So we have no ability to, as a municipality, establish a quiet zone which would govern how CSX operates within what we designate?
Yeah, you want to answer?
When you look at the two situations, grade crossings versus the stations in general, there are apparent similarities, but quite specifically, the quiet zone rules apply only to grade crossings and have only been developed to apply to grade crossings. They took close to 8 to 10 years to be adopted and become a norm that they are today. So it takes time to change the venue, to apply that to a new condition. Again, it is a similar situation about the difference between providing, with quiet zones, a directed sound at that originates at the source of the conflict, which is the grade crossing, rather than broadcasting over a quarter mile a horn that's 70 decibels. To get 70 decibels at the point where you want the noise, you've got to broadcast it at 100 decibels at the locomotive and spread that over a quarter mile. So there's a good reason to look at, what about if we put a horn and bells and flashing lights and signs at the crossing instead that just hit the 100 feet around the crossing? It seems to be parallel. We will explore that, but we're very cautious about over-relying or over-promising on any of these things. First of all, we have no control over it. Secondly, safety will prevail.
We're just exploring for everyone's edification. And just along the lines of, Tom, what you talked about, CSX may not have alternative warning systems, but conceptually we could conceive of lights or announcements that are, linked to a train's proximity to a station that articulate a verbal assessment of the condition of where the train is something that's probably a little bit more palatable than a horn of durations that vary with each engineer. And I think that's part of the problem that you see with CSX all across the country. They have policies which, say it's going to be a short blast, but they don't really define what a short blast is. For some people, that means 2 seconds. For others, that means 10. For others, that means ride the horn as long as you're going through the town. These things are so, they're so different so as not to become standardized, which I think is a great deal of the concern that you hear in communities, this intermittent of unknown duration noise. If there were a way to make it somehow less intrusive as well as standardized, conceptually, that could make this a lot easier, right? Yes.
An example in this region of an annunciator system is New Carrollton, the platforms where Amtrak goes by. Acela trains will go by at speed, so when an Acela train is approaching, the signs, the station signs, which have messages and as well as the PA system, will have a message saying, high-speed train approaching, stand back. There's a very loud, whiny alarm. There's flashing strobe lights. It lets somebody know if you're standing on the platform, there's a train coming and stand back. That actually could be more informative from a safety standpoint than a horn that says, what the hell is that horn about? So there may be some benefits to that. It's something would like to explore with CSX, well, as long as they would like to explore it with us, and when they tell us to stop talking, we will hang up the phone and start again another time.
Well, and a couple of points in response to your early question. I think this is not an FRA problem to solve. I don't think that's an avenue. Federal Railroad Administration. I mean, if it was a grade crossing issue, they probably would get involved. This is not, and so they're not likely to. In fact, I'm sure they wouldn't. But
Mike, Steve, pull that up a little.
so it's not really. I don't think recourse is through the FRA. I think it's directly with CSX. The other is that I know that in 2014 we talked about these kind of on-platform warning devices, and they weren't real interested in it at the time. And that's not to say it's a dead issue, but we had brought that up as a way to, get rid of the need for the horns at all, and just use on-platform warning devices. But that did not progress.
So just to, fully articulate what we're dancing around, effectively, we have no leverage with CSX. Even though everything is negotiable, they're not doing anything because of a regulatory rule. It is their prerogative, and we have not ascertained where we have leverage. We just simply try to present a case that they will buy into.
And hope we have a good audience at the time we're making that case, yes.
Yeah, and I think, though, that, in terms of leverage, we both share the safety objective, so it's really a conversation about how to reasonably achieve that objective without a lot of unnecessary noise, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, no one is arguing with the old idea, you use the horn when you need to use the horn. It's a matter of just when this is a routine, mechanized practice for no reason other than to follow a company policy, which could probably be achieved best in other ways that are more compatible with our unique circumstances here.
Do you have other questions?
Not about horns.
Do you have other questions? Not about horns. Go on to other questions about the station and platform. Katie?
Happy to keep going. So, I think one of the things that gets a little lost in discussion of where the platform is located is just about the potential vision here for a station. And in fact, we talked about this at the ops board meeting, there were some questions about what it would mean for some of these options to go through a building, right? Sort of questions about signage, you have an MOU, the logistics sort of seemed hard to fathom. And I think it might be worth surfacing in some discussion here, whether that's from our Arlington County staff or VRE, about what the vision is here for potential station amenities that would accompany the platform itself, and how that could be different from the current as set up. Sure.
So I'll just say that we're very early in the process, and right now we're trying to pick a station location. So we've done some amount of thinking to that level, but more details will be worked out in the next phases. As far as going through the building for option 2 and 3, we have worked with the developers who own that building, JBG Smith, I guess it is now. And they're very supportive of this idea of having VRE in their backyard, and allowing that connection to happen through the building or over the building, as as it works out. But there is a lobby area that used to serve the connection over Crystal Drive that was taken out, and that could be repurposed to allow the when the VRE folks land on the terrace, go through that building, enter the tower there, and then come down through that lobby area. So that is something we have talked about. But as we go through the design process, we want to keep our options open.
Well, it seems there might be some opportunity here, and I believe this has been part of the discussion with the working group, for something that actually starts to feel like a repurposing of that lobby into a purpose-built train station, which for neighbors who are concerned about the ancillary noises beyond the horns, the sounds of people congregating or dashing for their trains, the idea of potentially getting that out of the platform itself and onto something more of a train station is probably worth exploring. So I know we'll continue those conversations, and hopefully before our vote in September. I think the other point too to just maybe worth surfacing is to talk just for a moment about the connectivity here. I know, we talk about Metro, obviously that's sort of the big one. It's, about a fifth of riders, I think, per your data will go on to Metro, but, to maybe sort of plug in both the short-term knowns and then the longer term potential that Jay was referencing in some of the bigger term questions, the potential for Amtrak, for MARC, that this could be a multimodal center, well beyond just connecting VRE to Metro. So I suppose that's more of a comment than a question, although if our staff has anything to add or if VRE staff does as well. But I think, potentially what we could be looking at here is a multimodal station that has, some design appeal and potentially some value to folks in the neighborhood as well as to VRE riders as an opportunity to connect to other forms of transit in the longer run. So that seems, worth sort of surfacing, across the three options, that this is part of the vision. This is not just the nuts and bolts of extending a platform. So again, a comment, but I would be happy to, any reactions or thoughts would be very welcome.
Another aspect of option 2 for the north end that comes out into the south end of Water Park, and we've also heard that there are already conflicts between the pedestrians and the bikers or the bike path, and then adding another access to VRE there would that area would need to be looked at very carefully, and we're committed to sort of helping with the redesign. I think the developers who own that are also supportive of that idea. So there's a opportunity to create something, a place there that is sort of what you were talking about, that visibility on the street and that access, to a multimodal access, a point right over there.
It just strikes me that as this discussion goes forward, and I'm going to try to better understand or tie up so that we all understand the process underway here, but both VRE and Anthony, when he was responding to Katie's question, started to identify some of the criteria, some of the metrics that you'd be thinking about or that all of us need to think about when considering options, right? So we've heard about the intermodal connections, how valuable are they, both today and projected. So some of this is about what exists now and capturing it or quantifying it, but some of it is also not about today, but about 10 and 20 and 30 years from now. Its relationship to these choices, the sector plan. We heard an initial reaction to that. The visibility from the road, sort of as by way of enhancing or multiplying the service, the opportunities. I mean, honestly, when you have a station, it should be designed in a way that it's an asset and an enhancement, not just for the people using it, but a placemaking opportunity. So, is there a difference among the three options in that regard? Proximity to, buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings, impacts, noise, ways of mitigating. Those are all obviously questions. And then access, not only intermodal, but just access. What are the ways people are going to reach this platform? I mean, what are the paths, the routes? And I guess back to the sector plan, and this was the question Katie was asking, is what's the projected potential for density? There are many hoops to go through before any of that density is realized. We have a very robust site plan process. On the other hand, there's a potential built into the sector plan. So how does this, not just today, but 10, 20, and 30 years down the road, dovetail with the projections of potential density? So, I mean, those are some of the things that we've been talking about that obviously anytime we're being asked to give a preference, those are the kinds of things you'd want to know before you made one. So can you speak to the working group? I keep hearing about this working group. I know it's only in the last few months that I knew about this going on. The working group's been in place how long? What is their role? And then we're going to get to what the next steps look like for us.
If my memory serves me, we started this project in February, so we haven't been working on it very long. That's why you haven't heard about it before. That's when we tried to.
And out of the loop, you know?
That's when we congregated a working group to help us understand different perspectives.
Right.
It's a technical working group where we have, of course, we have VRE staff and our consultants, but we also have Arlington County staff from transit as well as other, planning and other staff. We have So as we went along, we've actually added to the working group where we realized, the National Park Service would have a big say in this, or might potentially have a say in this. So we invited them to join the working group, and they've been participating. We heard about the big interest in the airport connection, and so we invited MWA. They have a representative on the working group as well. And of course, the bid, has been very supportive and interested in the project, and so we have a representative attend to give us the perspective of the, it's a different perspective than maybe we have, and the developers who own the land or own the property that we would need to go across and in many cases go through, we need to work with them as well. So we have them.
ABG is on the working group?
Yes, we do have one or two representatives attend every meeting for that as well.
Okay.
DOT shuttle operator?
So yeah, we do have, the Pentagon is a huge center, for our destination for our riders. And we realized that the DOT shuttle that operates actually picks up many riders at Crystal City Station. And so most recently, they've joined the working group as well to try to see if we can coordinate in the future if we move the station.
Trying to parse through here is, and I know we all set up different types of working groups, right, for different purposes. You described this at the front end as a technical working group. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've seen those happen. Technical working group are usually staff, that have a Department of Transportation background or something, and a lot of our regional groups have the elected officials or other kinds of stakeholders, but then you have your technical working group, and the technical working group is usually the technical professionals in a particular area. It's a little bit of a hybrid you have here, because you also have property owners. You have, not all of them though, right? You have the commercial property owners, not the residential. Is that right?
That's correct. And the reason for that was mainly because we realized that we would need to work through, some sort of access or easement or something with the commercial properties. We were trying to avoid the residential properties. There is an existing easement on a residential property which might be used or which would continue to be used.
The thing is that the Park Service might have to provide land or work with you in terms of an easement. And
not for the
viewscapes tend to be more of their issue.
Okay, viewscapes, but they have an authority in that regard?
They can exercise
They
that.
say no to, can they say no? And then the project is
We have to.
disrupted.
We would have to
Disrupted
mitigate.
is a good way of referring to it.
Yeah.
There are methods to mitigate, but we have to mitigate. We can't.
You need their approval,
That's correct.
okay?
If they feel there's a viewscape impact.
And the Crystal City bid?
The Crystal City bid, I think, was interested in a study, doing a feasibility study for the.
And Bridge,
The airport connection.
the airport connection, so they got added for that reason. Well, I mean, I know, and I think what we're doing is we're all recognizing that, we're sort of watching this process you've created and playing our role in it, because what you've asked us to do is to suggest to you that what our preference is. Are you required to do what we want, or are you planning to do what we want, or are you asking for our opinion and our advice? And honestly, I'm not prejudging what the best answer is here, but we have a lot of advisory boards and commissions. We respect what they advise us on.
Yeah.
But they are not making the decision. We're making a decision. And so I'm trying to get some clarity as to what our role really is here and how it will be taken by you.
Well, thank you for that, because we are interested in the viewpoint and insights from Arlington County, and we've been working through a number of different stakeholders, and obviously we want to have the Board of Supervisors weigh in and provide input. The ultimate decision will come down to a combination of our Operations Board and the commissions. The
Commissions being the NVTC and the PRTC.
major decisions of, big construction projects, Steve would have to help me with the specific legal issues relative to locating a station. I think it's safe to assume that the commissions would play a role. Typically, for those who aren't as familiar with how we're set up, our Operations Board is comprised of commission members from the NVTC and the PRTC who work more closely and in more detail with VRE issues on the VRE Operations Board. So for instance, Ms. Crystal is a member of the Operations Board. She's also a member of the NVTC. So what we typically do is we'll go, and what we're planning on doing is get input from obviously Arlington County, the neighborhood, the business community, all the other stakeholders we've had. So that helps us form our recommendation, hopefully reach some kind of consensus that would form our recommendation to the Operations Board. We're targeting September. It's not a hard and fast date, but we do want to get out ahead of the Atlantic Gateway project, so there is some time constraints that we're trying to work within. But we're targeting going to the September Operations Board meeting for us to present a lot of what we shared with you, plus the feedback we're getting from others, and make a recommendation on, we believe this is the right site. And depending on whether it rises to a level of needing the commissions to weigh in on it, then we would go to the commissions in the October meeting. This is one of the stations that's referred to as a system station. All of our other except for Alexandria, Arlington, LaFont, and Union Station, the jurisdictions are responsible for the funding, essentially, of those station improvements. We work closely to get other grants to help do that. So this is what's referred to as a system station, which would really fall back to both the Operations Board and the commissions to make the ultimate decision. I feel confident that the Operations Board and the commissions are going to be interested in Arlington County's viewpoints on that, however.
I think in the best of all worlds, we're all on the same page, right? All I'm trying to do is identify where the authority rests for a final decision. And, let's hope that isn't the case where, the VRE staff or the Operations Board has one thing in mind and the County Board of Arlington has a different view. But we're nowhere near that yet. I just wanted to clarify where the authorities lie.
We're obviously hoping that we all kind of coalesce on this looks like the right answer.
Let's see. And the other point being, I'm not here to question, criticize, or redesign your process. I think the reality is that the citizens who live, as we know several are here today, and, we have an active community, and that's a good thing, right? So people are following this, and to your credit, you've done some outreach, you've done some work to bring the information to them, and we now have an opportunity or an obligation to provide an opportunity for the citizens that have an interest to communicate to us, and we'll be doing that. Just to clarify again, we have the Transportation Commission will be asked to give us their feedback. There may be other commissions. I don't know if there are other commissions that take this up or not, but that's certainly the one that makes the most sense. They meet tomorrow, I believe.
They're having public comment tomorrow at 7 p.m., and then the Transportation Commission will have a public hearing on this
in September.
On August 31st at 7 p.m., and then the board takes it up.
Okay, you're sure it's August 31st? I thought I had heard that they had set up a separate meeting in September.
Oh,
Dennis
is
Leach.
here with the latest information.
Yes, so we worked with the chair of the Transportation Commission, and he was amenable.
Can you pull that up, Dennis?
The staff worked with the chair of the Transportation Commission, and the chair was amenable to having a supplemental commission meeting in September after Labor Day to allow for more robust discussion.
I am very glad for that, only because I know their normal meeting was scheduled late August. The fact is, that's right in the middle of, you just don't know. I mean, better to do it after Labor Day than before. So I'm very glad. I just looked at the website to see if I could find when those meetings were. They're not on the TC schedule. It would be very helpful to put that on there and highlight the fact that, you know, this would be on the agenda. And I know we're sending this out in letters going out from the board office. I think that information's already been communicated. So anyone that writes us will hear, and hopefully that's spreading out to people who are interested. But to be sure that that appears on the website in the appropriate places would be useful.
We can certainly make that available, but for the record, that meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 13th. Commission meetings start at 7:30. It is up to the chair's discretion in terms of the order of the agenda that evening. It may be the only item, there may be other items.
Right. Do we know if VRE is planning, or who would be doing is there a presentation? Is there any other discussion there, or is it really essentially people grabbing information from the information they've already got, the PowerPoints that they've already got, or maybe the agenda item before TC that day?
I think for the meeting that is this Thursday, it really is the commission just taking public comment on the topic, but because the item before them in September would be an action item, it would be appropriate if VRE staff is available to make a full presentation with all the analysis and all the input that they've heard, and then the commission will take public testimony.
I think that's appropriate.
Take an action.
And some of it will be information we've already seen, but hopefully by then it'll even be more robust, responding to some of the questions or concerns or, you know, that exist, as well as preferred, you know.
And the only other group that we are still reaching out to that I think has relevance on this particular topic is our Transit Advisory Committee, was the issue of intermodal connectivity connection between rail and Metro Rail and bus. Is in their purview. They are a county manager appointed committee. We are going to try to see if we can get this on their agenda at the end of the summer.
And the expectation is then that at the county board meeting in September, which I don't have the dates, either this Saturday or the Tuesday, the county board will consider a resolution expressing our preferred location. Is that correct?
And there will be an opportunity for public comment before the county board as well.
Right. That'll be a regular agenda item, and every regular agenda item, opportunity for people to weigh in. And there's always a chance to weigh in between then and now, obviously, in many different ways. But the manager's recommendation will also be coming forward at some point. Is that prior to the Transportation Commission meeting? You would be making a recommendation from the staff?
We would go to the Transportation Commission with a draft recommendation.
Okay, got it. So those are the steps. Yet it's still a couple months away before, what are we in now? What month are we in? June. July, August is about 2.5 to 3 months away, okay? All right, so that at least clarifies a little bit of the process, so thank you for that. Can we talk for a moment about the other pedestrian bridge, the futuristic, exciting? I have not heard of a single person who has a problem with this. I think everybody loves the concept. I mean, that's all it is right now, is a concept. No, you like it, right? You must like it. Don't look at me like that. All right, so I guess my only question at this point is that, as I understand it, this is not a part of this decision on the station. However, the last thing we want is to make a choice on a station platform location that makes it harder or creates an obstacle to achieving a pedestrian bridge or tunnel. I think the bridge seems to be where people are, but a connection to the airport. So is that, at least at that level, a part of the discussion?
I believe it is, and I think for the same reasons that you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that again, this isn't something that VRE is planning to do, but I think it's important that because of the potential regional connection, that would make a lot of sense. I think as we contemplate a location with all of the factors, I think one of the factors that should be considered would be a potential connection to the airport by others.
Anybody have any
I want to
questions about that?
express enthusiasm for the idea and share maybe, I know we have a representative of the Crystal City bid and they're leading us in sort of the feasibility analysis at this phase. And, I think just recognize Rob Mandel who's here. This is a tremendously exciting opportunity, I think, for VRE, for all of the potential connectivity of the different systems that would be able to now connect to the air. And it's also, I think, transformative, could be transformative for the economy of Crystal City, as well as a wonderful amenity for the residents of Crystal City. So add my enthusiasm to the long list of people who feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, a few things. The airport connection, I've long been excited about it. It's kind of a no-brainer in many ways. But really, the key driver of that is going to be MWA. So at some point between whatever preferred alternative has come up with and you figure out funding, there will need to be substantive engagement on them refining this concept to make sure that we're accomplishing all those goals. Mr. Chairman, if I could, though, I would like to go back to where you were on the previous item, just to ask about maybe the inclusion of some other of our advisory commissions. I'm thinking specifically based on Ms. Crystal's, including Mr. Fusarelli, about the Crystal City Citizens Review Council, which sort of monitors, evolution of the sector plan, and would think that on some level it might be useful just to have an airing and a hearing from them on this issue. And then as we kind of think about, I'm guessing that the two options which are most preferred at this point from either VRE's perspective or a combination of stakeholders and community, options 2 and 3 both involve the creation of perhaps that transformative public facility inside a private office building. And I'm wondering to what extent we may think about, I don't know if it's planning, I've heard a suggestion of PFRC, but just some other, some other body that's not the Transportation Commission per se, but that is looking at, land use and public facilities. And I don't quite know the answer to that.
Thank you for raising that. I actually do think the Planning Commission, and this doesn't probably fall within the purview of their normal scope, but for them to get this as an information item and decide whether they want to weigh in and give comment on it makes complete sense for me, and I'm happy to forward this on and ask staff to forward this on through the Planning Commission to encourage them to take this up. Whether that means they would need a presentation by VRE or at least to have VRE staff available to answer their questions, I think could be worked out. And then the CCCRC is another option as well. That works for me. Thank you for bringing those up.
And if I could just ask, about community engagement up until this point. Sonali, the slide that you presented, number 22, as you kind of gave a summary of how all of these stacked with their relative, with your subjective scores of their impacts. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what went into determining the level of community impact and how you judged each option accordingly?
Which one do you want?
Which slide? Is it one of the slides?
There's slide 22. There we go. It's on the screen.
So as far as community impact, we had a number of sub-factors that we looked at. And so they're kind of related to our NEPA, analysis, although it's too early to be we're not doing NEPA analysis right now. But we wanted to consider some of the bigger things so that we're going into it aware of what we're facing. And so we tried to conduct, noise being a big issue, we did conduct monitoring the way we would do that for the NEPA analysis. We also looked at visual impact, as we talked about. Visual impact through looking at it from the GW Parkway as being, it has a historical or sort of a natural feel that we need to preserve, and we cannot have a building structure that impacts that viewshed. So that would help us to determine whether we can do a bridge, or whether a bridge would be feasible or a tunnel would need to happen. In general, a tunnel is usually more expensive than a bridge, although in this case, in some of, because of the structures and buildings that we're going through, it might be actually more expensive to do a bridge. So thinking about those kinds of things, looking at some of the other factors actually were not, there were no differences or there were no impacts, such as looking at environmental justice populations. We didn't see any impact or any environmental justice populations of note. We also looked at water resources, and that didn't seem to be a big factor we would need to consider.
Water resources?
Yes.
Yeah,
Impacting wetlands or things like that.
Act on water.
right.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I mean, that's all very robust, and, I thank you for that analysis. I think, one of the things that struck me when I saw community impact, when I see words like that, I usually think, people engagement and feedback from community, and that didn't really go into the assessment of this, and that's fine, that's your prerogative, but I think it's all the more important that the process that Mr. Fazette just outlined really provides what for many people is, an understanding of how we assess community impact, hearing from residents, from workers, from system users, for example. All of those data points are just as important, in my opinion.
So the way we have done the public outreach is, I guess, we started out on our public outreach before we even began on this phase. I mean, this was in anticipation of the project. And we were invited by the Civic Association to be on a panel with other rail, DRPT was there, CSX was there, and the Long Bridge folks, DDOT was there talking about the Long Bridge. And we were there to share whatever idea, whatever we knew of the project at the time. We hadn't, as I said, we didn't have a consultant under contract or anything yet. So we did go out and, express that we are going to start this project, and we would like to hear, what we should be considering, before we even do any work. When we did start the project, the first round was in March. I don't know if you can pull up the schedule. In March, we did a round of public outreach where the picture on the left is a pop-up event that we had, and that's because our riders don't spend a lot of time outside of work in this area, so that's the way to reach out to them, is at the station in the evening when they're going home. You get a quick moment to talk to them, and you can hand a flyer or show them something on a board. And that's what we did to reach out to our riders. And then I believe it was the next day we had a public meeting. The next day we had a public meeting in the evening that we felt would be more convenient to residents to come and we did a full-on presentation to talk about, again, whatever we knew about the project at the time, but really soliciting any feedback that we should incorporate into our scope of work, into our project considerations. And we had some specific things that we presented, which were the screening criteria, the 4 factors that we used. We actually had 5 at the time, but when we went back to do the technical evaluation, we realized that there were some overlap, so we consolidated to 4 so that we're not double counting. And then we also had the design parameters to say what we're trying to achieve, and the option locations to see if there was any other location we should look at or shift one of the locations or whatever. So we did have that conversation. Then we went back and did the technical evaluation, and then we brought that out to the public again. We had actually 2 meetings this time because we needed to do the presentation and really share a little bit more information. We actually did not get a lot of riders at either of the meetings, and so we've tried to put things on our website and put things out over the through the internet and online, so that hopefully we're reaching out to riders. But we want to try to do a little more rider outreach just to make sure. Usually, they're happy and we don't hear from them, but we also we want to make sure that they're aware that this is happening. We have heard back from a lot of residents, both rounds, and we've taken the comments into consideration in the first round. We're preparing responses to the comments for the second round as well, and we'll post that on the internet, on our website. We have a project webpage that I try to keep updated for the latest information.
And just as a quick one, we don't need to get into a long thing here, but regardless of either option, it's going to be going to be trains moving close to where people either live or work. Are there any, since this is kind of unique within the VRE system, has there ever been a discussion of potential mitigants, regardless of which station preference is chosen, to somehow deal with that impact? And I'm not really sure what those impacts are really on the ground, whether they can be addressed through landscaping, through architecture. Is there anything that has been conceptualized to maybe make this something that blends into the community more?
Well, certainly from a visual standpoint, there's a lot of things we're going to do. The noise impacts are something that we really, there's not a good way to mitigate that other than what we've talked about, trying to come up with wayside devices on the platform. But as Mr. McIsaac pointed out, we can have those discussions with CSX. I just can't guarantee anything. But as far as all the other physical elements, I can't guarantee what kind of outcome we can get. I'll guarantee we'll try. But as far as what it looks like, how accessible it is, how people would get to it, wayfinding, all those kinds of things. I mean, we would work with the community and obviously Arlington County and the business community on all those aspects.
All right, thank you very much. The only last comment I have on back to that pedestrian bridge is I think I'd love to see some comparisons with Dulles. I know it's all MWA. I know they won't like this. But, getting from Crystal Drive or the Crystal City Metro or the VRE platform and getting over to National Airport, it's going to be less walking than just getting to your plane at Dulles. I mean, it's really quite amazing how close it is. And, how many airports do you go to where, you got to walk about 2 miles inside the airport to get to your plane. Here, once you get in National Airport, it's an incredibly convenient, compact airport. There isn't that far to go inside, but just to get to the airport from the center of Crystal City is incredibly accessible and convenient. And, as I've said at other places, I've done the walk once or twice going to the airport, and it's doable, but it's not easy. And it's not intuitive, and it's not safe. So, I mean, the idea here, which is a big picture idea, which I'm really glad everyone has come up with, the Crystal City bid seems to be taking the lead at this point, which is great. But knowing that whatever we come up with, whatever you come up with, won't preclude that, and that there's real energy behind it is very exciting.
Yeah, we've done comparisons with Dulles and some other
Oh, you've done that already?
Yeah,
Okay.
as much as to the extent that it is not our project and it's being done by others, but to consider those. Any of the options, there's no distinction between the 3 options with respect to airport access, although 2 and 3, that south end of 2, north end of 3 location is the closest point. It's 700 feet. For comparison, we've had that picture of the O'Hare underpass, which is 850 feet, so it's shorter than if you've gone through O'Hare than that. It is shorter than the new Silver Line access to Dulles.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. Let's not revisit that. Okay, but thank you all very much. I think the work session is ended. Thank you, but we do have one action item, and I put this sticky in front of me. Hope was going to grab me. Evidently, there was an oversight when we made appointments at the last board meeting, and a reappointment to the Planning Commission was overlooked and not taken, so I will move the reappointment of Eric Gutschall to the Planning Commission.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Crystal. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Carries 3-0. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know how that got missed. But thank you all for being here. A great discussion. We'll look forward to the next steps.
Thank you very much.
We're adjourned.
I don't think you needed a second.